Trump's hush money / election interference trial is in full swing. Hope Hicks was pretty damning. Stormy Daniels was pretty humiliating. Basically, Trump is not enjoying his appearance on the courtroom version of This Is Your Life. Meanwhile, the classified documents case is a can getting kicked down the road, very much in Trump's favor. The same thing may have happened in Georgia. So outside of the New York courtroom, Trump is having a pretty good week in his full-time occupation as criminal defendant. A brain-eating worm apparently entered RFK Jr.'s head several years ago and died, presumably from starvation. The governor of South Dakota has made history for what might actually be the most incredible own goal style self-own in the history of American politics. That's right. We got to talk about Cricket the dog. Finally, Biden is trolling Trump today in Wisconsin in about the coolest and most meaningful way possible. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
All right. I mean, there's so much news this week, Jason. I feel like it's going to be like the Micro Machines guy, how fast we talk through all this. I think obviously the biggest news is that Stormy Daniels testified this week in the Trump trial. And this was controversial testimony. And I mean controversial in many ways, I think. And I think it really centers around how detailed she was about her encounter with Trump. And I think like from a legal perspective, some people are saying it maybe was too candid and gave grounds for appeal. But I'm going to give you a red pill, blue pill opportunity here, Jason. How detailed do you want me to get about what it is she said here?
I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. I've read all of it. I went to the Daily Mail. That's how bad it was to actually get some of it.
Well, let's get some of these details out there. And, people listening to this, maybe not with the kids in the car, but she met Trump at a celebrity golf tournament in 2006. She said she accepted this at the encouragement of her publicist. She met Trump up at Trump's suite where he greeted her in silk pajamas. She teased him that he looked like Hugh Hefner. I mean, that's rough for Hugh. And they never had the planned dinner that they wanted. And things kind of took off from there where there was like, she spanked him with the cover story of some magazine and all this. I mean, I don't know. How much of this we want to know? They had very brief sexual intercourse, it seems. And he sent her on her way. And these details were really laid out in the courtroom. And Trump seemed incensed about it. And actually, a lot of lawyers on the internet seemed incensed about it, even people who want to see Trump behind bars, because I think I'm no criminal defense attorney, but I think there's like a big relevance question here. And Merchan seemed to allow in more than people suggested was wise, but I don't know a lot about how that operates.
So, okay, first, an interesting thing he said that's not that surprising in his encounter as recalled by her. And then second, let's talk about the legal part. So to me, one of the pieces of it that doesn't surprise me at all is that one of the things he said in order, I guess, to make her feel like it would all be okay if they had sex outside his marriage, which is he reassured her by saying he and Melania sleep in separate bedrooms, which...
Well, yeah, apparently he showed her photos of his wife before they had sex, which is really strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just to me the least surprising thing in the world is that even back then, it's sort of a show marriage. And she's like, all right, I'm here. You're rich. I'm not leaving. We have an arrangement. All right, let's put that aside. And actually, kudos to you. I think you made it through all that pretty well without it being something that kids in the car couldn't hear. So I thought you did a good job. There's a nice radio edit of her testimony. But here's the legal aspect of it, which is that the question of relevance, at least in this case, it's not just whether the material that she brought up is relevant or not, it's whether it's prejudicial, right? Meaning, did she say stuff that is not relevant to the question at hand, to the trial that's actually going on, that would prejudice the jury against the defendant? Stuff like, my wife doesn't like me, we don't sleep in the same bedroom. Stuff like the implications she made that there was a power imbalance and that she didn't really want to be there. And it really got very close to calling into question the issue of consent. And so that's what the defense lawyers are saying out of the presence of the jury, which is that, they moved for a mistrial, saying, all the things she said, which were not in response to questions asked by the prosecutors, that this can prejudice the jury. We need to start over. We need a new jury, which, as we'll get to in a moment, is clearly the legal strategy across the board for the Trump team, which is just kick things down the road in general. This is a real thing. And it seems that what happened, and Judge Merchan said afterwards that there were some things that she said that he felt were not necessary. He chose not to grant the mistrial, but he also defended the prosecution a little bit, saying it's, basically that it's not like they asked her to say these things, that it was clear that they were asking her questions and she was doing the opposite of like what you prep a witness to do in a deposition, which is she was giving very long answers, including answering questions that weren't asked. At one point, the judge stepped in and asked her not to do that, maybe more than once. So I guess what I walk away from this thinking is, naturally, Stormy Daniels, who has had Trump attacking her for the last few years since this came to light, had some stuff to say. And now she had an opportunity to sit in the same room as Trump, and she was going to say it no matter what questions you asked.
Yeah, and the standard you're talking about relevance, at least in federal court, I don't know what the equivalent in New York is it more probative than prejudicial, right? That's the rule of evidence that basically the rule of evidence that subsumes all rules of evidence. Shout out to Dan Kahan, taught me evidence. Basically, we spent the entire semester on that one rule, and it's super subjective. And in this case, you could see it going either way, right? Like in a circumstance, for instance, of Melania, it's actually really relevant because one of the defenses is that Trump was worried about Melania. Well, if they're
Worried
not
about
having
her finding out.
Yeah, and that was his motivation for paying off Stormy Daniels. Well,
as opposed to his campaign, to save his campaign, right?
And I learned yesterday. I talked to a professor yesterday, who's writing a book about kind of like the ins and outs of this trial, among other things, who said that the prosecution doesn't have to prove that he wasn't concerned about his wife and that wasn't a motivator. They just need to prove that one of the motivations was the campaign finance piece. It just has to be a part of it. So he could both be concerned about his wife and campaign finance, and that could motivate him, and it would still get them what they need. And for the audience, just to remind you, there's a misdemeanor business records sort of violation here, which is if he had just messed with his books to do this payoff. What elevates it to a felony is if he was doctoring business records or committing business records fraud in furtherance of another crime. And the main other crime is either federal election law violation or a New York election law violation. And so that's why this is super important. There were other pieces here that I think from the Daniels testimony that were relevant. There was a lot unearthed about like the back and forth. And this was Trump's lawyers really putting this out there, of like Stormy Daniels and Trump going at it with each other on the internet, where he called her horse face and sleazebag, and she made fun of him. And then it was about like who made fun of who first, which is exactly the kind of posture that you want in, your once and future potential president of the United States, is, who's name calling first.
Yeah, I mean, and the Trump lawyers are doing that to try and impeach her credibility, right? Try to the way you do that, you don't say it to her when she's on the stand. You put all this stuff into the record, and then in the closing, you get to come back and answer that question and say to the jury, "Look, none of that stuff's true. She just doesn't like him because they haven't been nice to each other, and this is an opportunity to get back at him. So don't believe anything she said."
I mean, and we got to be honest, like impeaching credibility of witnesses is actually quite effective. And like the sort of standard that we used as a measuring stick to measure all trials is the OJ trial. And if you remember Furman and so many other witnesses who came up, they were just vicious against these folks. And I think like it'll be an issue. Stormy Daniels, I'm not sure it's really going to do the work for her, because her testimony, as much as people are giving it attention, is not that important, because nobody disputes that the act happened. So
except Trump.
Yeah, well, and actually that's his problem, because it's really hard to when he's paying, like he's paying her off. Like nobody disputes that he paid her off. So I think for the jury, that's not going to matter. What's going to matter is all the other testimony around how much did Trump know, because there needs to be mens rea here. Like you need to know, like the prosecution needs to prove that Trump knew he was not only committing the business records crime, but that he also knew that he was aware that they were trying to commit whatever the other crime was, election fraud, et cetera. And that's where some other testimony is going to be relevant. Hope Hicks, who also just testified, being super relevant here because she testified a little bit around. It actually is relevant for two reasons. One is the sort of didactic, rational part of this, which is that mens rea piece, like what did Trump know, et cetera, which we'll get to. But the other piece here is my theory here, and this is certainly true of the OJ trial, is that these things are rarely about a lining up of the arguments on one side and a lining up of the other side, and which is like more logical, right? These things are often decided at the emotional level. And Hope Hicks, by all accounts, was a very persuasive witness because she hasn't been somebody who has done a lot of interviews or any since leaving. She was visibly upset. It seemed pretty obvious to a lot of people that she didn't want to be saying anything one way or the other. Like she wasn't motivated out of malice or anything like that. And the evidence of this is that Trump's team didn't elect to cross. So they had an opportunity to really go at it with her, and they could have, like, quote unquote, impeached her credibility. So they did nothing. I think for them, they wanted to see her off the stand as quickly as possible because what she was saying was not very flattering to Trump.
Yeah. And as far as the question of election interference, I mean, she made really clear that Trump was really involved in the messaging of the campaign, that he was very concerned about scandalous stories coming out just before the election, that when he mentioned it to her, he acted like Michael Cohen had done this all on his own with his own money. And wasn't that a generous thing to do? And which is when the prosecution was like, is that commensurate with the Michael Cohen that you knew? And she's like, no. So
yeah, no offense to our colleague Michael Cohen, don't know him, but I'm sure he's a member of the
colleague.
Midas Network.
I guess he is.
We're not taking a position on whether she's right or not. We're just saying that is what she said, right? And but I think this is all setting up for what I think is going to be a very, very important piece of testimony, which is Michael Cohen. And undoubtedly, what's going to happen, because he's the one who's going to say, he's going to speak to the mens rea, like the intent from Trump, his knowledge of the crime. And what he is probably going to say is Trump knew, right? And so then it's going to be up to Trump's lawyers to try to impeach Michael Cohen's credibility. And, Michael Cohen admitted to perjury, he went to jail. He's, he obviously, he and Trump, like if you're talking about Stormy Daniels and Trump going at it, like Cohen and Trump went at it. So they're going to have a lot to work with. Now, what undoubtedly is going to happen is the prosecution is going to unearth as much as possible indirect, like the sort of Eminem 8 Mile, like I'm going to say everything about myself that you're going to try to get me on in your cross, and to take the sting out of it. That is undoubtedly what's going to happen there.
And it's important to remember, going back to Stormy Daniels for a moment, that the entire strategy of the Trump defense has to be to take people like Cohen, like Stormy Daniels, impeach their credibility, and really have the entire case hinge on whether the jury believes those people and try to get the jury to question their motivations, which is why I still think it is an enormous liability for the Trump team that Trump is continuing to pretend that the encounter with Stormy Daniels never happened. Because for you to say, okay, these people are lying, I don't believe them, but I do believe the guy who we just got a bunch of testimony saying that he had sex with this woman who he's still saying he did not have sex with. And to quote Mitt Romney, who didn't say this at the trial, the idea that he just paid her $130,000 for nothing is a little hard to believe. So they're starting way behind on the credibility side of things.
Well, one witness who I think didn't get enough attention was, I think it was the book publisher or something, who was asked about some passage Trump wrote in a book about how he's just always aware of what he signs. Like when he signs a check, he's like, you gotta know where all your money's going, which
Oh
is
wow, I
relevant
missed that.
because he's saying he's just signing the stuff blindly. He
Mhm.
doesn't know what it is. And then there's obviously he's confronted with this other, his own words
Well,
saying he's aware of where all the money goes. And that he apparently, and I can't remember, this might have been Hope Hicks who testified to this, that he will cross off checks saying void with a magic marker if he doesn't want to pay somebody.
well, I think somebody also testified that no payments above a certain amount, and the 130,000 was above it, were ever made without it going either through Trump or one of his sons.
Yeah.
And so, uh, yeah, I mean, look, if they don't get a guilty verdict, it'll be the most shocking thing. I won't even say since OJ, like, because I remember people were really like, this could go either way with the OJ trial. And there's like one clear answer here, and it's a jury in New York City. So,
Well, yeah, I do want to prepare people because we have seen nothing but pretty disappointing news on the legal front for Trump, that it's possible. And here's why it's possible, because it's actually a really hard, like what they're trying to get him on is actually a pretty high burden of proof,
because of
which
the
is
elevation to election interference.
because of the elevation to election interference and because you have to show some sense of knowledge and intent, right? And
Mhm.
so I don't know why this thing does the thumbs up, but so we should, I think we should all ground ourselves in the and we'll get to this in a second, like the sheer amount of bad news that we're getting on the legal front involving Trump, not always just because there's a kooky judge, which is certainly what's going on, and at least one of the things we're about to talk about, um, but because there are real challenges. And like a good example is like in New York, same DA's office, the least flattering defendant of all time, which is Weinstein. New York's own Court of Appeals, and which is our Supreme Court, um, reversed course and threw out the conviction on the least sympathetic person on the planet in Weinstein because of some errors that this prosecution made in overstepping. And so that, like, the appeals is always an issue, but also I
Mhm.
think all you need is one for a hung jury, right? And that's where things could get tricky. And like all it's going to take is one juror to say, you know what? I think he's a sleazeball. I think he signed these checks. I think he was trying to cover this up, but I think he was worried more about his wife than the elections. I don't think he was really concerned, and he has a long history. The Trump defense is going to be. We saw this with the Fox News clip we looked the other day. He has been paying people off forever or whatever, and who knows what they're like. The prosecution probably knows, but who knows what they're about to show about his long record of paying people off.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true. The defense has not gone yet.
yeah.
And let's be honest, it could be as simple as you just have one juror who decides they'd like to have a Kyle Rittenhouse-esque career as a right-wing media person.
But we gotta
You know?
remember some of these people are also corporate lawyers, right? Like, and some of them are gonna be really, like, I talked about the
Mhm.
emotional element of this. One of the reasons why Trump's team was okay with these lawyers getting in there is because they're gonna be
Analytical.
very precise about
Mhm.
this really tough statute. So I would not be shocked
That's a good
if
point.
there was a hung jury. Now, obviously, don't know what's coming, but I think they're smart to have lawyers on there because those
Mhm.
people are going to hold the prosecution to a very high standard, and that's the best you could hope for in New York if you're Trump, right? Like you're not going to get the best you can hope for is some smuggle a MAGA person on there, but what's the second best? Well, somebody who's going to be really exacting on the legal standard, because although it is clear he did the thing in terms of Stormy Daniels, and most reasonable people think it's more likely than not that he knew exactly what he was doing, we need beyond a reasonable doubt on the mental state, which proving what somebody is thinking is actually really hard. Well, with that sunny piece of news, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some unfortunate good news for Trump on the legal front. We're going to talk about RFK Jr.'s brainworm. We're going to talk about Kristi Noem's dog, and then some warning signs for Trump in Indiana, and a lot more when we come back. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. And personally, I've been pretty stressed lately with everything going on in the world, in the news, in my city, just work stuff too. And when we keep these stressors bottled up, it can affect us negatively. And therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. I know so many people who've benefited from this and learned positive coping skills and how to set boundaries and empower them to be the best versions of themselves. Not just people who've experienced trauma, but of course, those people too. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched to a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/M54 today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/M54. So let's face it, after a night of drinks, I don't bounce back the way I used to. And if you're as old as I am or more, you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes you have to make a choice. Either you have a great night or you have a great next day. And I've been facing that choice until I found ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol, probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD students to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break that byproduct down. And just remember, you can make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, and then you could drink responsibly and you could feel your best the next day. It's amazing. I wish they had this when I was in college. So I first gave ZBiotics a try when I was bringing in the new year, and I drank probably a little bit more than I should have. And the next day I felt great. I went out for a surf, and this is how it's going to be, right? This year, I want to form more sustainable and better drinking habits. I know so many of you want to do the same. And you don't have to take the all or nothing approach anymore. ZBiotics will allow you to enjoy nights out in moderation while working towards your goals. So go to zbiotics.com/majority54 to get 15% off your first order when you use majority54 at checkout. That's ZBiotics. And they're backed with 100% money back guarantees. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So remember to head to zbiotics.com/majority54 and use the code majority54 at checkout for 15% off. And thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and for the good times. All right, Jason, well, I was just monitoring the chat. Somebody asked a question. There's like, somebody's worried. They're like, are these two legal experts? Are they saying that Trump's going to get off? Okay, so a couple of things. One is we both have law degrees. I don't claim to be a legal expert. You've practiced. Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah,
I practice civil law, not criminal.
Yeah, we both have law degrees, but don't claim to be experts. I was also Bragg's, the DA in Manhattan. I was a strategist on his election. That doesn't in any way mean I have a claim to know what's happening in that courtroom beyond what's reported. Do I think he's going to get off? I think it's more likely than not that he gets convicted, but I think the percentage that he gets off is pretty high. I would put it like 30-40%. And if you also then put in the appeals, I would put it at like 50-50 that he wiggles out of this, and certainly like more likely than not to not have to enter a jail cell until they pass the election, right?
That part for sure.
Yeah. So like, I still think it's more likely than not that he gets a guilty conviction, but I don't think it's that overwhelming, given that you got to convince 12 people who you could have any number of issues with that 12. Some of them could be secretly MAGA, but also, as I said, some of them could just not be persuaded, and they could be different. They could not be persuaded for different reasons, right? You also got to remember 12 people. Some of those people probably committed adultery. No offense to those 12, right? So some of them will come in with their own baggage, right, around like what adultery means and whether to then leap to that to something else. I mean, it's just a very complicated thing when you're trying to convince 12 people of anything.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good points. And since we're on the subject of how things could go well for Trump legally, do you want to talk about what's going on in Florida?
Yeah, I mean,
you can lump Georgia into it, I guess.
Trump is just he is lucky. He was lucky to get Aileen Cannon. And then some of these things are not luck. Like, I think there's just so much happening at the appellate level, whether it's from the Supreme Court all the way down. And basically Cannon wrote in a Tuesday filing that the trial date, which was originally scheduled for May 20th, is delayed that so she can resolve pretrial motions in the case. She said, quote, finalization of a trial date at this juncture would be imprudent and inconsistent with the court's duty to fully and fairly consider the various pending pretrial motions. I mean, like, it just seems like she's not committing to a date. And, we've covered this ground before. I would say there's a lot questionable stuff around her. And she'd already been smacked down by an appellate court before this whole thing even started. That's going on as Trump also won a delay in Georgia, where a Georgia appeals court issued a terse opinion, basically granting review on whether Fani Willis should continue oversight in that case. We've obviously covered that whole saga too. So it's just a cacophony of issues here. I've talked to many experts at this point who all say the same thing, which is it's almost a guarantee at this point that the only verdict Trump will see before the election is Bragg's case.
Yeah. And
in the criminal matters, obviously, there's the civil verdicts we've already had.
While some of it's luck, I think you also have to give credit to Trump's defense team in executing on a very clear strategy in a very unique situation, because it's not, there's a reason that we have a guarantee to a speedy trial, right? It's because usually if you are accused of a crime and you're a criminal defendant, you don't want to wait around to have a trial, right? Because you might be in jail. You don't want, and even if you're not being held, you don't want your life in limbo. You want to move on. And if you are sentenced, you want to get your sentence started, all those sorts of reasons. And then you do have other situations where it's like, we're going to delay and delay, where the defense wants to delay for a variety of reasons, probably so they can mount a better defense, probably so that in some cases, so that witnesses might, get reasons they may want to change their mind. We're talking traditional organized crime stuff, which is, I think, how we should see this. But this is such a unique situation because there's an actual finish line for the Trump defense team, potentially, which is if you can get things just delayed after the election, particularly in the federal instance, well, then you can get them delayed until he's in a position to pardon himself, to order a corrupt and seized by the White House Justice Department to drop the case, all sorts of things like that. So they're executing on the only strategy they have, and they're executing very well. They're throwing a lot of crap to the wall, and some of it is sticking.
Well, one other thing, I've mentioned this before, but so much of our attention is, well, what if Trump wins? Well, if Trump loses, he's in huge trouble because he also can't dangle the pardon power over all these witnesses, right? So he's obviously flashing his pardon power to try to keep people in line. It's not, I wouldn't say it's working perfectly, right? But that'll be totally gone. And then at that point, I think you're going to start to see him delaying less. Because I think in certain cases they're going to want to dispense with some of these cases, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, unless he's going to try to work the clock to another 4 years, but even that would be crazy. Like I don't think it's possible to delay 4 years after that. Like you would have to see some of these cases.
Yeah, well, look, what's going to be fascinating if we are fortunate enough to see him lose the election is, does this still dominate the news? Like, when the trials actually happen, do we pay attention? Do Republicans feel the need to defend him at that point? Do we finally get to the place where I've been hoping we would get to eventually, which is where Donald Trump is the Iraq war of presidential candidates, and that he is just the Iraq war, everybody acts like, yeah, that's just a thing that happened. You can't find anybody who supported it. And what I do eventually think will happen in this country, I'm optimistic, is that we will eventually get to a point where the Donald Trump presidency is a thing that happened, and you can't seem to find anybody who thought it was a good idea.
Well, we'd be lucky to get to that day. I mean, right now we're kind of the opposite of that, unfortunately. Like, he's had tremendous staying power, and this is going to be a Herculean effort to get through this election with a victory. And one of the people who's been standing in the way of victory is a gentleman by the name of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is having a tough week And I want to say thank you, Liz Smith, for this one. Don't know for sure that this story was a result of Liz Smith, but from what I understand, she's on the RFK Jr. beat for the Biden campaign. I could be wrong about that. She's our friend. She's been on this pod before. She's a absolute hatchet woman of a strategist in all the best ways. And there was a story that dropped in the New York Times that unearths some kind of proceedings from a 2012 divorce. I think it was a deposition where Kennedy claims a lot of things, including that a parasite possibly ate part of his brain. And he also claimed some kind of mercury-induced fogginess. Just what you want for your president,
Well,
you know?
yeah, I mean, it appears that what he was doing in this deposition was trying to help his case in a divorce that his earning potential wasn't that high. I
Right.
assume to keep either child support or I don't know if he has kids, so at least maintenance or alimony payments down. And saying like, look, it's not gonna like I'm gonna raise much money. My executive function is compromised. I actually, unfortunately, I don't think this matters. And the reason I don't think it matters is because I think that RFK Jr.'s candidacy for the presidency is much more like a Senate or congressional candidacy than like a presidential candidacy, because I really don't think there are hardly any people who will vote for RFK Jr. because they think he's going to be president. It's a statement of something else. So it's like the difference between running for governor and running for senator. If you're running for governor and somebody finds out that you might be compromised in terms of your executive function, it's a huge deal because people think you're going to be in charge of important things, and they're right. If you're running for Senate in this hyper-polarized environment, it's become much more of a red versus blue. How is this person going to vote thing? And it doesn't, people don't really care that much about the candidate as compared to if they're running for governor. And because people don't think that RFK Jr. is actually going to be president, I don't think it affects his candidacy very much.
Yeah, I think of this as like the death by a thousand cuts piece, right? Like, how do you take care of somebody like RFK Jr.? You probably don't have a knockout blow, but you got to keep jabbing, right? And I think in this case, this is probably a good right hook. And what does the right hook do? Well, it does a couple of things. One is maybe there are a couple of people who are going to give him money who now are a little bit embarrassed to have him do an event.
Yeah.
Maybe their campaign is more distracted. Maybe they get on one less state's ballot because they're distracted by all of this, or maybe because they just have less money because those said donors didn't give them that, et cetera. Or maybe there are just some people on the margins who think he's just a little too kooky to be trusted on all this kind of stuff. And you just keep fighting. That's kind of what I see it. And then if you combine this with the strategy to try to make RFK Jr. very MAGA, right, which I could see the contours of this shaping up already, which there's been reporting that Trump is a little concerned about RFK Jr. Like this is the way to minimize somebody like him, or potentially even turn him to an asset, which I don't think is impossible. I don't think it's the most likely scenario that he helps Biden, but we sure as hell better try.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Hurt Trump.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to dropping this kind of oppo. I don't want people to be overly optimistic that it's going to drive people away from RFK Jr.
Yeah, you just kind of, it's one of those things you mentioned to the people
Right.
who are, and I did a cursory look on the internet, and a lot of the sort of libertarian leaning folks that I would have imagined to be RFK sympathetic were having fun with this one. And what I'm seeing amongst those people, the meme that I'm seeing is senile man over here, which is what they call Biden, sociopathic guy over here, which is they call Trump, and then brainworm guy over here, which whatever. If that was a person who was going to vote Trump, whatever, like then
Yeah.
I don't know, like or they were considering RFK. I don't know how those people vote, but
Yeah.
at least like, we're not going to make them love Biden, but maybe honestly, like if those are the three options and I literally just take them at their word that that's the truth, I'm going with senile, over brainworm,
Yeah. There you go.
So Biden 2024. All right. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Kristi Noem's dog and her incredible book tour. We're going to talk about some actual substance that Biden announced in Wisconsin. And then we're going to talk about some warning signs for Trump in Indiana when we get back.
Typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk growing kids should never eat. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved superpowered chewable vitamin. While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk, yet it tastes great and it's perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hiya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. Hiya is designed for kids of all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. It's also fun to say, Hiya. As you know, I'm a father and I'm always on the lookout for the best possible vitamins for my child to take. I'm so happy I've come across Hiya Health. The ingredients are amazing and I don't have to worry about sugar or gummy junk because Hiya Health is made without that stuff and it's still able to keep that great taste. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/majority. This deal is not available on the regular website, so go to hiyahealth.com/majority and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
This episode is sponsored by Rhone. If you're like me, you understand the pains of finding what to wear. Most clothes are uncomfortable. They may be too tight. They never, actually fit your size because, a lot of us are not exactly small, medium, large, extra large. We're complicated. Sometimes when you find something you like, you can only wear it for a few hours before that important meeting or dinner, and then you have to change it into something else. And everyone wants to dress their best. You want to look good at all times. And frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. And here's some anecdote. I'm wearing my Rhone pants right now. And last week I was at a wedding. I wore my Rhone button-down shirt to the wedding at a formal wedding, and I will also wear it tomorrow when I just go into a coffee shop to have a meeting. It's that versatile. So it's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. Yeah, I actually not so neatly folded that shirt in my bag for the wedding, and I was able to take it out, and automatically I was able to put it on. It looked like I had ironed it, but I didn't. It's an inside secret between us. So with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll also be smelling fresh and clean all day. On top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can dish the dry cleaner all together. We're on the move a lot, and the Rhone commuter collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. I absolutely love it. And even after I wear it all day, I feel super fresh because that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. At that wedding, I was dancing up a storm, wore it, no problems. So the commuter collection can get you through any work day and straight into whatever comes next. So head to rhone.com/majority and use the promo code majority to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to rhone.com/majority and use the code majority. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Well, you've done book tours, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
I would say pretty successful book tours, right? Your last one was a New York Times bestseller.
Both of them, actually. Yeah.
Look at
not
that.
to toot
Good
my
for
own
you,
horn,
man.
but
Congratulations.
yeah. You know what? It helps not to kill any of your pets, and
Well, at least don't brag about them, right?
Yeah, at least don't.
Look, to be clear, I've never ever killed a pet. I have a friend that we both know. I will not mention his name because it will ruin his career, it seems, based on this reaction if I mention it. But he euthanized his dog, and I have never let him forget it. And my mom, who listens to this podcast, also has never let him forget it. And I even went so far as to tell him that The Branch, my company, was going to do a true crime podcast on it. And I actually mean it. And if you're listening to this and you know who you are, shame on you. Horrible. But backing up a second, Kristi Noem is the second-term governor from South Dakota. Shout out to Leslie and Ed Garish from South Dakota, longtime listeners to this podcast and good friends who have been on the Noem beat for a while, talking about how there's some problems with her. And Exhibit A is in her book, No Going Back, which just hit shelves. Noem describes Cricket, her dog, as extremely energetic, but not receptive to any training. Jumped off of their truck, chased after neighbors' chickens, and just had an aggressive personality, as she put it, attempted to bite her. And so they put the dog down. They said, Kristi Noem said, quote, "It was not a pleasant job, but it had to be done." She also mentions killing a goat that was causing trouble.
Now, am I correct? She shot Cricket, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Is that right?
Let's see.
Yeah, shot Cricket in the head, threw Cricket, I think, in like a rock pile or something, or a fire pit. I don't know. And then shot the goat. Okay. I guess in like her mind, what she was going for here was, look at how rugged I am. Look at, there's this thing that particularly women candidates have to sort of figure out how to handle the warmth versus strength thing. For male candidates, it's very easy to project strength, because people are more receptive to the idea of a male candidate being strong. So then male candidates have to project warmth. For women, it's very difficult because they have to project strength in order to have any opportunity. But if they don't project warmth, people really dislike them. So she dialed up the strength to a point where there is no room for warmth. And that would be, it's like an own goal, man. I mean, this was her book. The whole book tour thing is hilarious to me because obviously she had a ghostwriter. She said a bunch of stuff to the ghostwriter. She never bothered to go look what the ghostwriter said, except that she recorded the audiobook. So she did read what the ghostwriter wrote. She has gone all the way up to the edge of, and had not done it, but you can see her wanting to claim that she hasn't actually read the book. It's just, man, it is amazing. I think, do we have a couple of clips here?
We do. Let's start with her appearance on Fox Business.
Still think that you are in line to be Trump's vice president?
No, it's up to Donald Trump. He's the only person who will decide this. He's the only person who will decide. And I spoke. Yes, I do speak to him.
May I ask what he said to you about being vice president?
No, I never tell anybody my personal conversations.
Did
with
the dog story
President
come up
Trump.
in a conversation with Trump?
I talk to President Trump all the time.
About the dog?
About a lot of things. And right now, I tell you what, he is being persecuted in a political witch hunt in this court case. So I'm proud of him about how tough he is and how well he is doing.
Did you bring up the dog?
Yes, enough, Stuart.
Did you
this
bring
interview
up the dog
is ridiculous, what you were doing right now.
So
you need to stop. It is.
Okay.
It is.
We'll
Let's talk about some real topics that America.
So that keeps happening because she won't say, she won't answer the question.
You want to know what I would say if I were her?
Sure.
And this is, somebody's going to clip this and pass it off as my actual viewpoint. But what I would say is, look, anybody who has a farm knows you got to make tough decisions all the time. Did you eat meat? Do you eat pigs? Pigs are smarter than dogs, and we kill pigs every day, right? And so, look, if you're around animals all the time, you know that you got to make tough decisions. And look, I know that you, with your sort of Upper East Side Park Slope mentality, where you take your dog to this hair salon, that's going to affect your sensibilities. But the people out there in real America, they'll understand. That's what I would say if I were her.
So that is a terrible answer. And
for people here, do not clip this. This is not my view.
Hold on. Let me say, and given the fact that she did kill the dog, the best answer available to her. So I agree with you. It also, because the whole thing begs the question of, did you consider giving the dog to someone else?
It's interesting. That was my point to my friend.
Oh God, let's not go back.
This was one of and he claims he tried. Not a lot of evidence of that, but Yeah.
This is that dog you watched for a while, a couple of years ago.
I'm not gonna give any more
All right.
details because
Okay,
it will out a person who I really, really like.
Okay, so let's get
very close with.
back on track. This other clip we have, is this the clip where she talks about Biden's dog?
Okay,
I think.
so other option, Jason. Also, probably the best she has going for her, given the audience she's trying to appeal to, is to go on the offense.
Let's
Like,
see.
forget all this defense, Jason. Let's go on offense. She started talking about Biden's dog. Let's go to this clip.
She killed her dog, and she says she would have killed the president's dog, too, if it were up to her. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem continues to raise eyebrows, especially among dog lovers, with her latest remarks.
Kristi Noem is under fire again today for suggesting she would have shot President Biden's German Shepherd, Commander, just like she shot her own dog, Cricket. But Noem tells Face the Nation host Margaret Brennan that Jill and Joe Biden should have done more.
How many people is enough people to be attacked and dangerously hurt before you make a decision on a dog and what to do with it?
Well, he's not living at the White House
That's
anymore.
the question that the president should be held accountable to.
You're saying he should be
That's
shot?
what the president should be accountable to.
In her new book, No Going Back, the governor bluntly writes, "Commander, say hello to Cricket for me."
Okay, let's review where we are now. Okay, Kristi Noem went from being really like probably top 3 on the list of people who could be chosen for Trump's running mate to, by virtue of a book that she published, and her reaction to it, is now known as the lady who is running on the idea of she likes to kill dogs. Like in America, where when you have a dog die in a movie, it usually tests poorly, and then the actual version of the movie that gets released, the dog lives.
Well, what do they do? Whenever there's a movie, Rounders, right? What do they do in Rounders? They have the bad guy torture a dog. John Wick.
The whole John Wick thing.
Yeah, right. But look, to her credit, you've worked with publishers before. What do they say? You have to live up to your title. The title of her book is No Going Back, and there absolutely is no going back.
She's like, yes, he deserved to die.
So like, Samuel L. Jackson.
She's like, I killed my dog, and I'll kill your dog. I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you. Anyway, but can we talk about the Kim Jong-un thing?
Yeah, educate me on this one, because I was so distracted by the dog piece that I missed the geopolitics of this.
The other thing that she said to her ghostwriter falsely that then ended up in the book that she didn't read until it was an audiobook is that she had met Kim Jong-un and she had stared him down, and she like created this whole scene where he probably underestimated me, but I'm used to dealing with little tyrants. Like, she literally created a scene where, for some reason, the governor of South Dakota is in a very tense meeting with the pariah leader of North Korea, right? Now, why
you were going to say
I was always going to say North Dakota, yeah, which that may have happened. I don't know, but like
water rights.
Maybe that's what happened. Yeah. Maybe that was the mistake she made.
Simple, clear.
But she, first of all, it is an absurd claim on its face. But then after that, rather than say like, yes, that, yes, I have a ghostwriter. Yes, the ghostwriter misunderstood. That should not have been in there. Her tact is to just be like, I'm not going to talk about the meetings I've had with foreign leaders. She refuses to say that was a lie or that was a mistake. Yeah, like, because it's well known that the governor of South Dakota has some pretty high level talks with foreign leaders. Yeah. And now I guess she's trying to say this happened when she was in Congress. I still don't know why a member of Congress was meeting with.
Really hard to meet leaders like Kim Jong-un.
Very hard.
Yeah, I mean, the only time, I don't think Kim Jong-un comes to the UN General Assembly. That would be the only way you'd possibly meet somebody.
Would have been a big deal if he met with members of Congress.
Yeah.
It come to find out, she said in a recent interview, she's like, she goes, I have been to the DMZ. Okay, lady, like, so have I. Like,
Kim Jong-un is like shouting over the fence. Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, as Secretary of State, South Korea brought me, my chief of staff, and my wife out, and we had to spend like 10 days there. We went to the DMZ. We saw the North Korean soldiers. At no point was I under the impression that I had had a meeting with the leader of North Korea. So
Yeah.
quite an amazing thing to just make up. But anyway, I would just like to finish on my favorite part of this is that she has now become the candidate who wants to kill dogs. She's like just
Strong position.
strong position.
Well, no going back wherever you get your books. Support your independent bookstores, everybody.
Yeah.
What's happening in Wisconsin?
Okay. This Wisconsin thing is really actually quite substantive and exciting. We're going to play a clip, but I'll give you the very short summary, which is that in the run up to the last campaign, I don't remember if it was 16 or 20. Actually, it was 16. Trump was going around and he was in Wisconsin saying, we're going to do this huge deal with Foxconn. We're going to employ, so many people. There's going to be so many jobs. He called it the eighth wonder of the world. Of course, it didn't happen. Let's go to this first clip.
In fact, 6 years ago, when my predecessor came to Racine with the promise of, quote, reclaiming our country's proud manufacturing legacy. Well, we had infrastructure day every week for 4 years, didn't build a damn thing. He and the administration promised a $10 billion investment by Foxconn to build a new manufacturing complex, to create 13,000 new jobs. In fact, he came here with your Senator, Ron Johnson, literally holding a golden shovel, promising to build the eighth wonder of the world. Are you kidding me? Look what happened. They dug a hole with those golden shovels, and then they fell into it. Look, they didn't shovel other dirt. They did shovel some dirt. 100 homes were bulldozed. They wasted hundreds of millions of dollars of your state and local tax dollars to promise a project that never happened. Foxconn turned out to be just that, a con. Go figure. In just 4 years under his administration, instead of creating 13,000 jobs in Racine, my predecessor, and 1,000 manufacturing jobs, rather than creating them, 1,000 manufacturing jobs left Racine. 83,500 total jobs left Wisconsin during my predecessor's term. But that's not on my watch. We're determined to turn it around.
So, Peter, this new AI Microsoft thing, $3 billion, big job creators, that's in Racine. Isn't that the same town that Foxconn said, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we're going to build a big plant, and they never did?
Yes, and that was a huge Trump announcement back then, and he said the factory was going to be the eighth wonder of the world, but then Foxconn decided to really scale back their plans, and the land is still available, so Microsoft is going in.
It's going to be good for those people.
All right. Thank you, Peter. A few weeks ago.
Today, it's another example of private sector optimism. Microsoft, as the president already pointed out, is investing $3.3 billion to build a new data center here in Racine. That's going to help operate one of the most powerful artificial intelligence systems in the world, and I've gone around the world, literally, not figuratively, meeting with the leading architects of AI. It's going to result in 2,300 union construction jobs just to build a new facility. And 2,000 permanent workers to work in the data centers. In addition, we're also providing a pipeline to train these new jobs. A pipeline that starts right here at this very spot.
Okay, and then I think we may not have this other clip, but the other clip that I was hoping to play is of the actual CEO of Microsoft being interviewed. And in it, he's asked about the role of the Biden administration, and he makes very clear that the Biden administration has a lot to do with why they decided to move forward and actually do this. He gives the Biden administration a lot of credit, talks about the infrastructure law that was passed, talks about all of the stimulus that was done that makes it possible for them to do this. The reason I wanted to show this is because, one, I think it goes to the argument that we hope is the argument that carries the day in November, which is getting shit done actually matters, because that's what this is. But then I also think it's important for us to remember why it is that Trump went and said stuff like this all across the Midwest in particular, over and over again, leading up to 16, leading up to 20, promising all these jobs, because what Trump understands is that what people in the Midwest and the South are looking for, more than anything, really, if you were to take all of the different issues and put them in together, is what we are always concerned about is that our kids will be able to find opportunity where we have raised them so that we can be around our kids and be around our grandkids. Like, that is the issue that no one ever gives voice to. And so this matters a lot for Biden to go into a swing state like Wisconsin that I'm sure is rife with people concerned about their kids leaving and about jobs leaving, and be able to be like literally on the piece of land where Trump failed to keep a promise. We are coming in and we are keeping that promise. That is really, really cool.
Super powerful. And, the job now is to, remind people in Wisconsin who's responsible for that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the hard work begins. But you can imagine that's going to show up in a lot of ads around Wisconsin between now and the election.
Absolutely. So I wanted to end on that high point. With that, one for us, Ravi, what's going on?
What is happening in New York? I mean, it's just been really fascinating time in New York. It's beautiful out and very low key. I don't really have much to say. I watched that Tom Brady. Did you watch that?
The roast?
The roast?
Yes. There were some pretty amazing parts.
Fascinating TV. I didn't love the shots at the Buffalo Bills, but they were expected.
Yeah, I didn't even notice them. You were maybe looking for them.
Yeah, there were a few. I thought that was like the cultural event of the year. I thought apparently he was paid $30 million for that. That just came out today. $30 million.
Which I think is the amount he lost in crypto.
Yeah, so there it is.
You could see where his motivation was. I think the best joke in the night, by the way, was Missouri's own Nikki Glazer saying that even Gronk was like, "Me know that, not money."
Well, I thought that Drew Bledsoe was really good.
He was.
Bledsoe, who's for people who don't know, is the quarterback that Brady replaced. And he said something about, one thing you wouldn't know about is your 40th wedding anniversary, or whatever the number was,
28th
wedding anniversary, which I thought was a nice little jab.
It was pretty incredible. Stuff going on here. My baseball season has started, which means at the age of 43, I have renewed my weekly, sort of deal where I play on Monday and then I spend Tuesday piecing my body back together so that I can play again on Wednesday. I actually, this week I decided that during the summer, I'm sort of like, in Mario, those little skeleton characters that you can defeat them, but then they piece themselves back together and you never actually defeat them. That's me in my 40s now during baseball season. So that's fun. And I turned 43 last week. So one thing I would say is, if people are interested, I put on Instagram and on Threads, I posted a list of 43 lessons.
Oh, I gotta check that out. That's great. I turned 41 last week too, so I forget that our birthdays are basically.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Yeah. So we're getting.
You should publish your 41 life lessons. I would be very interested in reading Ravi's 41 things that I've learned.
Yeah. It's a little late now. Maybe I'll get working on my 42.
Yeah, that's fine. There you go. Yeah. So I got my 43. They're up. If people want to find them, they can find them on Instagram and on Threads. I'm at Jason Kander. Ravi is at Ravi M. Gupta on everything. Please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. And remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.